Good afternoon. I'll get started in a moment. In just one moment, we're going to get started. Second. Okay, good afternoon, and welcome to another day with lunch break with the Rabbi as we continue back in our Jewish course of why of every single day exploring different customs, ideas, and Judaism. Today we're going to touch upon something we started a few weeks ago, and we'll just go a little more deeper and then move on to the next subject as well. Today's question is, why do we pray? Doesn't God really know what he's doing? Can we really affect his will? Which has been an old age question for centuries, which seemingly one may suggest if we wouldn't know that the sages have told us that we're allowed to pray, that prayer is probably an act of heresy. Because in essence, what are we praying for? We're asking God to give us something that we haven't already gotten. Or we're asking God for something that we do or don't deserve. If we believe in God, don't we think that God is all the knowing and knows what we deserve, knows what we should get, knows how we should correspond? So then why are we asking for God for something? God already knows what we need if we believe in God. And if more so, why do we think that us praying as mortals can actually change what God's divine will is to be? Do we think that we can affect God's will and change God's will? So as we explained that prayer, the concept of prayer is more than just asking or saying a lip service or expressing our feelings to God. When somebody wants something, the very fact that they get you to ask for it creates a relationship. The reason why you ask certain people for certain things is not because they are random people in your life. It's because you developed this and cultivated a certain relationship with that individual, and therefore you feel comfortable enough to ask them for those specific things. The same is also true in our relationship with God. Because we have a relationship with God, we therefore ask God for things. Part of creating and developing the relationship with God is that God makes it necessary for us to ask for things. And when we ask, we then create and cultivate that relationship. And the same idea is when we talk about the concept of prayer. So therefore, the sages of the Great Assembly, when they set up the 18 prayers of blessings, they created it in such a way that it should have the different needs that every single person generally needs. But then, of course, there are certain prayers that we can add in our own specific needs. But the concept of prayer is telling us and making it in a way and a method of cultivating a relationship with God. That's one method of prayer. But there are different layers of prayer, which is the first layer of prayer, as we say the blessing, Baruch Atah, blessed are you. The word Baruch means to draw down. Atah means you from the greatest of heights. When we cultivate a relationship with God, we are then able to draw down a blessing which is there for us. So it's not heresy. Yes, we are deserving of it. The only reason why we haven't gotten it until now is because of some type of blockage. And when we pray for it, we automatically bring down and alleviate that blockage. So we're saying Baruch Atah, we draw down from a level which is even greater and beyond that blockage. That's one level of prayer. But then there's another level of prayer. The greater level of prayer is what we say at times, Yehi Ratzon, may it be your will. What does it mean, may it be your will? If it's God's will, then we can have it. If it's not God's will, then we don't have it. What does it mean, may it be your will? And the word Yehi Ratzon, may it be your will, as the sages explained to us, that we can attain through prayer a level which is even greater than just drawing down something from on high, but we can actually create a will and a desire by God, by the omnipresent, that we should be able to have something which maybe essentially initially we wouldn't have deserved it. But because of our prayer, we initiate a response by God that he gives us something which maybe initially we didn't have. So in prayer, there's really three parts to it. There's number one, our prayer can be effective because we experience change. We become different people. That means at the time before we prayed, we were in a distant relationship. So therefore, we were maybe not deserving of that blessing or that gift initially. Once we prayed, we then became a new individual. We became a new person, a changed person. We've now cultivated and created a relationship with God that we are now deserving of the prayer, which maybe before prayer we haven't been deserving of. Number two, the prayer itself can change their circumstances, meaning that God desires our prayers, and therefore because of us asking, God then reciprocates in kind and gives us what we need. And number three, that our prayer can be so effective that it even can initiate a new desire, a new will, and bring about a blessing that transcends any divine system that comes above and beyond. So those are the three layers of prayer, see, which are beyond any type of question, which removes our questions that we started off with. Is it a type of heresy? Absolutely not, because we are becoming a changed person. We are taking that's already there, initiating a new will because of our relationship that we have with God. Which brings us to another question, talking about prayer. When we look at prayer and take, for example, any type of prayer book, you walk into any synagogue, you can find three different types of prayer books. You'll find so many different types of customs and ways of people observing Judaism. Why is it that in Judaism there is so much fragmentation? There are so many different ways of doing it. There are so many different customs. There are so many different types of observances. The Sephardic custom, the Ashkenazi custom. And in the Sephardic custom, you have the Iraqi, you have the Syrian, you have the Egyptian. And in the Ashkenazi, you have the Hasidic, you have the Lithuanian. Why is there so much fragmentation? Why couldn't there be one size fits all and everybody do the same thing, pray from the same prayer book and whatever it may be? So number one, it started the concept of the variations in customs, starting with that we have 12 tribes in Israel. Jacob had 12 different tribes. Each one had their way of serving God. In fact, if you recall, a few weeks ago, we added the Torah reading. There were 12 different leaders of the tribes who brought sacrifices, and the Torah enumerated each one of them again and again, even though they seemed identical. And the reason, because even though their actual sacrifices seemed identical, but they all had a different way how they served God. Every single person has his way how he connects to God. It's a personal thing. Now, beyond that, there are different customs of people, the way they came from, and therefore it's an emotional approach and a physical, physiological approach that how a person connects to God. Every individual has their own distinctive soul, and therefore has their unique approach in their divine service of God. And therefore, we each have to use our God-given strength and talents to be able to utilize that qualification, to be able to relate, and to be able to have that effectiveness in our relationship with God. Another practical difference was as well, was that being that Jewish people were scattered throughout the world, and there were different customs and questions that arose in different places at different times. Therefore, they dealt with different challenges in different places at different times as well. And being that there wasn't the communication to know, hey, you ruled like this, you ruled like that. So therefore, there was a big diverse type of relationship, of diverse type of opinion of where it came from. But at the same time, all of those opinions are rooted in one Torah that was given from Moses to Mount Sinai, passed down from one generation to the next. And every student and every diligent student, every person who studies the Torah appropriately is able to glean from the teachings of the Torah accordingly and according to his interpretation that he finds relevant and connected to as well. However, it must be rooted in the absolute meaning of the Torah. A person can't come along and start making up his own meaning and translation and saying this interpretation makes good sense to me and so on and so forth. So what we have over here is, to avoid this concept of fragmentation and discord, is that we recognize that every single person and every Jew is part of one body. And therefore we come from one intellect, just our emotions are different. So some developed in the hand, some in the heart, some in the face, and each person has their different ways. But despite our differences, we come from one whole unison, coming down from Moses and Mount Sinai, and then every single person interpreting it to make it sense according to where they lived and according to the times that they were in. So the customs that developed from a lack of communication because Jewish people were dispersed all over. However, they also come from within the motivation and the God-given talent of every single person. How they express their unique quality through a certain method of corresponding and relating to God. So when it comes to the prayers, for example, you have the Ashkenazic, the Sephardic, the Kabbalistic, and all the different ones, and you can bring them all together. Does a person feel that correctly as well? Thank you for tuning in today. Have a wonderful day. Looking forward to joining with you tomorrow again. Lunch break with the Rabbi at 1 p.m. Tomorrow we're going to discuss how Jews have survived the millennia while other civilizations have vanished. Have a wonderful day.